The rain hammered against my apartment window like bullets from heaven, each drop a reminder that God had a twisted sense of humor. I was hunched over my laptop at 11:47 p.m., reviewing financial statements that would make most people's eyes bleed, when my phone buzzed with a message that changed everything. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I took $520,000 from your secret account to fund my startup. You're welcome, Alyssa. I stared at the screen for a full 30 seconds, my coffee growing cold in my hand. My wife of 12 years had just committed the most beautiful mistake of her life, and she had no idea what she'd unleashed. Well, darling, I muttered to the empty room. Bold move. That account has more eyes on it than the Pentagon. You see, Alyssa Turner always thought she was the smart one in our marriage. The ambitious entrepreneur with her sleek startup dreams and her circle of fake friends who kissed her ass at every overpriced brunch. She saw me as Jack Turner, the boring financial analyst who spent his evenings with spreadsheets and his weekends debugging code in our cramped apartment. What she never knew was that boring Jack Turner had been working with the FBI for 8 months, and that secret account she'd just raided was a honeytrap designed to catch embezzlers and money launderers, the kind of trap that snaps shut the moment someone takes a bite. I pulled up the security camera feed from our joint office space downtown. There she was at 9:15 p.m., her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the fluorescent light as she hunched over her laptop, transferring my money to her business account. But she wasn't alone. Ronan Blake stood behind her, his manicured hand on her shoulder, his expensive suit wrinkled from what I could only assume had been an evening celebration. He was whispering something in her ear that made her laugh, that fake, tinkling laugh she reserved for people she wanted to impress. Ronan Blake, 41 years old, self-proclaimed angel investor, and the kind of man who wore cologne that cost more than most people's rent. He'd been circling Alyssa's startup like a vulture for months, promising funding in exchange for what I now realized were very personal favors. As I watched the security footage, Ronan leaned down and kissed my wife's neck. She tilted her head back and smiled, a real smile this time, the kind she used to give me before ambition and greed turned her into someone I barely recognized. "Enjoy the champagne, you two," I said to the screen. "Tomorrow's going to be very different." I reached for my secure phone and dialed a number I'd memorized months ago. "Mills here. Agent Mills, it's Jack Turner. The fish just took the bait, all $520,000 of it." There was a pause, then a low chuckle. "Outstanding. How do you want to play this? Public, loud, and devastating." "Copy that. We'll be ready to move at dawn." I hung up and leaned back in my chair, watching the rain streak down the window. Alyssa had always underestimated me, always seen me as the safe, predictable husband who would never fight back. She was about to learn that the most dangerous wolves are the ones who spend years pretending to be sheep. My phone buzzed again. Another message from my loving wife. "Don't wait up. Working late with investors. Big things happening. XOXO." I typed back quickly. "Congratulations on your big score, sweetheart. I'm sure it'll make headlines." She responded with a heart emoji, if she only knew. The FBI raid hit Alyssa's startup launch party like a tornado in a trailer park, sudden, devastating, and absolutely beautiful to watch from a safe distance. I positioned myself across the street from the glass tower, a pretentious office building where Alyssa had rented the penthouse conference room for her big investor presentation. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the party in full swing. 30-something entrepreneurs in their startup uniforms of designer jeans and blazers, clutching champagne flutes and pretending their apps would change the world. Alyssa stood at the center of it all, radiant in a red dress that probably cost more than our monthly rent. She was gesturing animatedly at a presentation screen, selling her vision of revolutionary social commerce integration to a room full of checkbook-wielding vultures. Ronan Blake lurked near the bar, his wedding ring conspicuously absent as he chatted up potential co-investors. His wife Sarah had no idea he was spending their anniversary playing sugar daddy to my ambitious spouse. At exactly 7:43 p.m., 6 FBI agents in windbreakers stormed through the conference room doors. The transformation was instant and gorgeous. Champagne glasses shattered on the marble floor. Investors scrambled for exits that were suddenly blocked by federal agents. Laptops snapped shut, phones disappeared into pockets, and the room filled with the kind of panicked chatter you hear when very wealthy people realize they might be in very deep trouble. Agent Mills, a stone-faced woman in her 40s who looked like she could bench press a Buick, strode directly to Alyssa and flashed her badge. "Alyssa Turner, you're under investigation for embezzlement and money laundering. We need to speak with you immediately." The color drained from my wife's face like water down a sink. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly, her carefully rehearsed pitch forgotten in an instant of pure terror. "There's been a mistake," she managed to stammer. "I haven't done anything wrong. Ma'am, you transferred $520,000 from a federal investigation account at 9:15 p.m. yesterday. That's not a mistake. That's a felony." Ronan tried to edge toward the emergency exit, but Agent Mills's partner, a tall man who looked like he'd played college football, blocked his path with a smile that could freeze hell. "Mr. Blake, we'd like a word with you too. Something about conspiracy and accessory charges." The room erupted in whispers. Phone cameras appeared despite the agent's warnings, capturing every delicious second of Alyssa's public humiliation. I could already imagine the social media posts. Startup Queen's FBI raid goes viral. Within 30 minutes, the party was over. Laptops were seized, business cards were confiscated, and every investor in the room was treated to a front-row seat as federal agents explained money laundering penalties in excruciating detail. But here's the beautiful part. Alyssa and Ronan weren't arrested. Not yet. They were released pending investigation, which meant they got to walk out of that building in full view of the business community that had just watched them get publicly destroyed. I followed at a distance as they stumbled onto the sidewalk, Alyssa's designer heels clicking frantically on the wet pavement as news vans pulled up to capture the aftermath. "This is insane," Ronan was saying, his voice high with panic. "How could they know about the account? How could they know anything?" Alyssa stopped walking and turned to face him, her makeup smeared with tears and rain. "You said it was safe. You said Jack was too stupid to notice." "He is stupid. He's a boring accountant who spends his weekends playing with computers." I smiled in the shadows. "Keep talking, you beautiful idiots." "Then how did the FBI know?" Alyssa shrieked. "How did they know exactly when I transferred the money?" That's when it hit her. I could see the realization dawn on her face like a sunrise made of pure horror. "Oh, God," she whispered. "Oh, God, he set us up." Ronan grabbed her arm. "That's impossible. Jack doesn't have the balls or the brains to—" "He's been planning this." Alyssa's voice rose to a pitch that made nearby pigeons take flight. "He knew about us. He knew about everything." I pulled out my phone and started recording as my wife had her complete meltdown in the middle of downtown, rain soaking through her expensive dress while news cameras rolled and social media exploded with hashtags like Startup Scam and Tars FBI Raid. By morning, the story would be everywhere. Alyssa's carefully constructed image as a brilliant entrepreneur would be replaced by mugshot-style photos and speculation about federal charges. Her investor network would evaporate overnight, her business partnerships would crumble, and her social media following would turn into a mob of trolls and critics. But I wasn't done. Not even close. As I watched Ronan's Porsche speed away with my sobbing wife in the passenger seat, I pulled out my regular phone and sent a text to an old friend. "Derek, it's Jack. Remember that favor you owe me? Time to collect." The response came back immediately. "What do you need, buddy?" "A tow truck and a very public parking job. I'll explain tomorrow." Phase 2 was about to begin. The next morning brought a symphony of destruction that would have made Beethoven weep with joy. I woke up to 17 missed calls from Alyssa, 12 voicemails that ranged from tearful apologies to screaming threats, and a text message that simply read, "We need to talk now." Instead of responding, I made coffee and opened my laptop to check the overnight damage. The FBI raid had gone viral exactly as I'd hoped. Their startup scandal was trending on Twitter, complete with shaky phone videos of Alyssa's meltdown and professional headshots of her and Ronan with "under investigation" stamped across them. The local business journal had already published a scathing article titled "When Angel Investors Become Fallen Angels," featuring quotes from anonymous sources who questioned Ronan's investment practices and Alyssa's business ethics. But the real masterpiece was brewing in the group chat screenshots that had somehow leaked to a gossip blog overnight. You see, Alyssa had always been careless with her phone, and she'd never changed her cloud backup password from our anniversary date. Every catty message she'd sent to her entrepreneur girlfriends, every cruel joke about boring husbands, every detailed description of her affair with Ronan, all of it was now public entertainment. My personal favorite was a message thread from 3 weeks ago. "Alyssa, God, Jack is so pathetic in bed, like watching an accountant try to salsa dance." Margot, "At least he pays the bills while you're building your empire." Alyssa, "Not for much longer. Ronan's going to fund the startup and my divorce lawyer." Margot, "You're terrible and I love it. Just don't let Jack find out before you're ready." Alyssa, "Please. He couldn't find his own ass with both hands and a GPS. I could rob him blind and he'd thank me for the convenience." The internet had a field day with that one. By noon I was ready for the next phase. I drove to Blake Motors, the luxury car dealership that Ronan owned and operated when he wasn't busy playing venture capitalist with other people's wives. I found him in his office, slumped over his desk like a deflated balloon. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled, and he was clutching a bottle of antacids like a rosary. "Hello, Ronan," I said, walking in without knocking. "Rough night?" He looked up with bloodshot eyes that widened in recognition and terror. "Jack! Jesus, you scared me! What are you doing here?" "Just wanted to see how you're handling your 15 minutes of fame." I settled into the chair across from his desk, making myself comfortable. "Nice article in the business journal, by the way. I especially liked the part about questionable investment practices. Very catchy." Ronan's face flushed red. "You son of a bitch. You set us up." "I prefer strategic planning, but sure, let's go with that." He stood up abruptly, his chair spinning backward. "You can't prove anything. That money was transferred legally." "From a federal investigation account that you and my wife thought belonged to me personally." I smiled. "Tell me, Ronan, how does it feel to be the starring attraction in a money laundering case?" "This is harassment. I could call the police." "Please do. I'm sure they'd love to hear about your affair with a federal suspect." That deflated him quickly. He sank back into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 41 years. "What do you want, Jack?" "Justice, entertainment, maybe a little old-fashioned revenge." I leaned forward. "But mostly, I want you to understand something very important. You picked the wrong man's wife to screw." I stood up and walked to his office window, which overlooked the dealership's premium lot, where rows of Porsches, BMWs, and Mercedes gleamed in the afternoon sun. "Nice collection you have here. Must be worth, what, 2 million? 3? "Jack, please. I know you're angry, but—" "Angry?" I turned back to face him. "Ronan, I'm not angry. Angry is what you feel when someone cuts you off in traffic. What I feel is much more focused." I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text. Within minutes, I could see Derek's tow truck pulling into the lot below. "What's happening?" Ronan rushed to the window. "Why is there a tow truck on my lot?" "Funny story," I said, checking my phone for the confirmation message I'd been waiting for. "Turns out your wife Sarah filed for divorce this morning, And according to her lawyer, she's claiming half of everything, including the business assets. Ronan's face went white. That's impossible. Sarah doesn't know about your affair? Oh, she knows now. Someone sent her the leaked group chat messages along with some very interesting security camera footage. I showed him my phone screen, where a video played of him and Alyssa in a passionate embrace outside the glass tower building. The timestamp shows this was taken 3 hours after you told your wife you were working late on inventory management. Sarah's lawyer found it very educational. Ronan collapsed into his chair like a marionette with cut strings. You've destroyed my marriage, my business, my entire life. No, Ronan. You destroyed your life. I just made sure everyone got to watch. As I walked toward the door, I paused and looked back at the broken man behind the desk. Oh, and Ronan? You might want to check your parking lot. I think your wife's lawyer sent someone to repossess a few assets. I left him there, staring out the window at the tow truck that was already hooking up his prized Porsche 911, and walked out into the sunshine with a lightness in my step that I hadn't felt in years. But I still wasn't finished. The best was yet to come. The call came at 3 a.m., jarring me from the first peaceful sleep I'd had in months. Jack, it's me. We need to talk. Margot Vance, Alyssa's best friend, business partner, and the woman I was beginning to suspect had orchestrated this entire disaster from behind the scenes. It's 3 in the morning, Margot. I know what you're doing to Alyssa and Ronan. I know about the FBI, the leaked messages, everything. I sat up in bed, suddenly very awake. Do you now? Meet me at Riverside Park in 1 hour. Come alone. The line went silent. Margot Vance was 35 years old, Harvard MBA, and the kind of woman who could smile while she stabbed you in the back. She'd been Alyssa's business partner for 3 years, always lurking in the background of every major decision, every investor meeting, every strategic pivot. I'd never liked her, but I'd never suspected her of anything more than garden-variety corporate ambition. Now, as I drove through the empty streets toward our midnight rendezvous, I was beginning to wonder if I'd been playing checkers while she'd been playing chess. Riverside Park at 4 a.m. was a noir movie come to life. Fog rolling off the water, streetlights creating pools of yellow illumination, and shadows that could hide any number of secrets. I found Margot sitting on a bench overlooking the river, her designer coat pulled tight against the morning chill. She looked up as I approached, her face pale but determined. You've been busy, Jack. Just cleaning house. I sat down beside her, maintaining careful distance. What's this about, Margot? It's about stopping this before it goes too far. Alyssa made a mistake, yes, but she doesn't deserve to have her entire life destroyed. Interesting perspective from someone who helped her steal $500,000. Margot's laugh was sharp as broken glass. Is that what you think happened? That Alyssa just woke up one day and decided to rob you? Enlighten me. She turned to face me fully, and in the dim light, I could see something calculating in her eyes that made my skin crawl. Alyssa didn't know about your FBI arrangement, Jack, but I did. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? I've known for months. You're not as clever as you think you are. Your secure communications with Agent Mills, your careful financial monitoring, I've been watching it all. My mind raced through the implications. That's impossible. The FBI thinks they're running a sting operation on random embezzlers. They have no idea they've been manipulated into targeting specific people for very personal reasons. I felt the world shift beneath me like quicksand. You set this up. You manipulated Alyssa into taking the money. I suggested she needed a bold move to secure her startup funding. I may have mentioned that you had a secret account that you were hiding from her. I certainly encouraged her relationship with Ronan, knowing it would make her more desperate and reckless. Why? Margot's smile was pure poison. Because 3 years ago, you convinced Alyssa not to invest in my first startup. You called it financially unsound, and built on unrealistic projections. You destroyed my company before it even launched. The memory came flooding back. A dinner party at our house where Margot had pitched her social media analytics platform. I'd reviewed her business plan as a favor to Alyssa and found it full of holes. My honest assessment had killed Margot's funding prospects and bankrupted her within 6 months. That was business advice, Margot. I was trying to protect Alyssa's investment. That was my life's work, Jack, my dream, my future. And you crushed it with a spreadsheet and a smug smile. She stood up and walked to the railing overlooking the river, her coat billowing in the wind like a villain's cape. So, I decided to return the favor. I spent 3 years positioning myself as Alyssa's trusted partner, feeding her ambitions, encouraging her worst impulses, and waiting for the perfect moment to destroy both of you. You manipulated your best friend into committing a federal crime. I manipulated my best friend into revealing what she really thought of her marriage and her husband. The federal crime was just a bonus. I felt a cold rage building in my chest, different from the calculated anger I'd felt toward Alyssa and Ronan. This was personal in a way that made my hands shake. You destroyed 3 lives for revenge. I destroyed 3 lives because I could, because it was elegant, because watching you all tear each other apart has been the most satisfying project of my career. She turned back to face me, and in the pale light of dawn beginning to break over the river, she looked like a beautiful demon. But here's the thing, Jack. I'm willing to make you a deal. I'm listening. I have evidence that could clear Alyssa of the federal charges. Emails, recorded conversations, financial records that prove she was manipulated into the transfer. I could save her from prison. In exchange for what? 50% of everything you own. Your savings, your investments, your half of the house. Everything. I stared at her for a long moment, processing the audacity of the proposal. And if I refuse? Then Alyssa goes to federal prison, Ronan's life stays ruined, and you get to live with the knowledge that you were just another puppet in my show. The sun was rising over the river, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. I stood up slowly, my decision crystallizing like ice in my veins. Margot, that's a very interesting offer. So you'll consider it? I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen, which displayed a recording app that had been running for the entire conversation. I'll consider how best to edit this confession before I send it to the FBI. Her confident smile faltered for the first time. You recorded me? I recorded everything. Your admission of manipulation, your confession to orchestrating the embezzlement, your attempted blackmail, all of it. I started walking back toward my car, leaving her standing by the railing in the growing light. Thanks for the chess lesson, Margot, but you forgot something important. What's that? I turned back to face her one last time. I've been playing this game a lot longer than you have. The public square in downtown was packed with the lunch crowd when I set up my impromptu theater of revenge. Street performers, food trucks, and office workers on their break created the perfect audience for what I had planned. I'd spent the morning making calls, sending messages, and arranging what I like to think of as my masterpiece. Agent Mills had been very interested in Margot's recorded confession. The local news stations had been intrigued by my promise of major developments in the startup scandal story, and my old friend Derek had been more than happy to help with the final logistics. At exactly 12:30 p.m., they all arrived as planned. Alyssa came first, her designer clothes replaced by jeans and a wrinkled sweater, her perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. 3 days of public humiliation and federal investigation had stripped away her polished veneer, revealing the desperate woman underneath. Ronan appeared 5 minutes later, looking like he'd slept in his car. His wife had changed the locks, frozen their joint accounts, and filed a restraining order. His business was under investigation, his assets were being seized, and his reputation was destroyed. He was exactly where I wanted him. Margot arrived last, her confidence intact despite our early morning conversation. She still thought she was the smartest person in the room, still believed she could manipulate her way out of any situation. They stood in an awkward triangle near the fountain, each one avoiding eye contact with the others, while curious onlookers began to gather. I'd positioned myself on the steps of the courthouse across the square, with a perfect view of the drama about to unfold. "Ladies and gentlemen," I called out, my voice carrying across the square, "thank you for joining us for this afternoon's entertainment." Heads turned, phones came out. The crowd began to grow as people sensed something interesting was about to happen. Alyssa spotted me on the courthouse steps and started walking in my direction, her face flushed with anger. "Jack, what the hell is this? What are you doing?" "I'm providing a public service," I replied, pulling out a portable speaker and connecting my phone. "I'm going to play some very educational audio recordings for our audience." "You can't do this!" Ronan shouted from across the square. "This is harassment!" "This is justice," I corrected, pressing play on the first recording. Margot's voice filled the square, crystal clear and damning. "I've been watching it all. I suggested she needed a bold move. I certainly encouraged her relationship with Ronan." The crowd fell silent as the confession played, Margot's admission of manipulation and revenge echoing off the surrounding buildings. Phones were recording from every angle. Live streams were starting, and social media was about to explode again. Margot pushed through the crowd toward the courthouse steps, her face white with rage. "You bastard! That was a private conversation." "In a public park," I replied. "Perfectly legal recording." The second audio file began playing, excerpts from Alyssa's leaked group chats, her cruel comments about our marriage broadcast for everyone to hear. Her voice describing me as pathetic and boring while detailing her affair with Ronan. Alyssa reached the bottom of the courthouse steps, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Jack. Please stop this. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." "Sorry you got caught," I said, starting the third recording. This one was Ronan's voice, captured from security footage at his dealership. "Jack is too stupid to notice. He's a boring accountant who spends his weekends playing with computers." The crowd was growing larger, drawn by the spectacle and the promise of viral content. Food truck vendors had stopped serving to watch. Office workers were calling their friends. Street performers had abandoned their acts to become part of the audience. But I wasn't finished. "Now for the grand finale," I announced, pulling out a tablet connected to the speaker system. The screen lit up with a video compilation I'd spent hours editing. Security footage of Alyssa transferring the money, Ronan celebrating the theft, Margot orchestrating meetings and phone calls, all set to a soundtrack of their own recorded voices confessing their crimes and betrayals. It was beautiful, devastating, and absolutely viral. As the video played, Agent Mills appeared at the edge of the crowd with two other FBI agents. They moved through the square like sharks through water, heading straight for Margot. "Margot Vance," Agent Mills called out, badge held high. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, wire fraud, and obstruction of justice." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause as federal agents cuffed the woman who had orchestrated the entire scandal. Margot's carefully constructed facade finally cracked completely as she was led away in handcuffs, screaming about lawyers and illegal recordings. But I still had one more surprise. As the FBI van pulled away with Margot inside, Derek's tow truck appeared at the edge of the square. Attached to the back was Alyssa's prized BMW, the car she'd bought with money from our joint account, the symbol of her independence and success. "No!" Alyssa screamed, running toward the tow truck. "You can't take my car!" "Repo order," Derek called out cheerfully, handing her an official document. "Seems your loan payments bounced due to frozen accounts. Bank wants their property back." The crowd laughed and applauded as Alyssa's car was towed away in front of hundreds of witnesses and dozens of recording phones. It was the perfect metaphor for her fall from grace, public, humiliating, and absolutely final. Ronan tried to slink away through the crowd, but I wasn't done with him either. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, "I'd like you to meet Ronan Blake, successful businessman and devoted family man." The tablet screen lit up again, this time showing the security footage of Ronan and Alyssa's affair, their passionate embraces and stolen kisses displayed for the entire crowd to see. Ronan's face turned purple with rage and embarrassment as the crowd jeered and pointed. Someone threw a half-eaten sandwich at him. Someone else started chanting, "Cheater, cheater," until the whole square picked up the rhythm. He ran, pushing through the crowd like a man fleeing a fire, his expensive shoes slipping on the wet pavement as he disappeared into the maze of downtown streets. The crowd began to disperse, chattering excitedly about what they'd witnessed and sharing videos on their phones. Within hours, the footage would be everywhere. News websites, social media platforms, late-night talk show monologues. I stood alone on the courthouse steps, watching the square return to normal, feeling a sense of completion I hadn't experienced in years. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Mills. "Margot's talking. Full confession. Alyssa's charges will be reduced to misdemeanor fraud. Thought you'd want to know." I typed back, "Justice served." Another message appeared, this one from an unknown number. "This is Sarah Blake, Ronan's wife. Thank you for giving me the evidence I needed. My lawyer says I'll get everything in the divorce." I smiled and put my phone away. 3 years of manipulation, months of betrayal, and weeks of public humiliation had finally come to an end. Margot was facing federal prison time for her elaborate revenge scheme. Ronan had lost his business, his marriage, and his reputation. Alyssa would avoid serious jail time, but would spend years rebuilding her life from nothing. And me? I was free. Free from a marriage built on lies, free from friends who had never really been friends, free from a life that had been slowly suffocating me with its mediocrity and betrayal. As I walked back to my car, I passed a newsstand where the afternoon edition was already featuring our story, FBI Sting Exposes Startup Scandal and Love Triangle. The photo on the front page showed me standing on the courthouse steps, arms crossed, looking like a man who had just won the greatest victory of his life. Because I had.